Hello, my name is Marek Gális. I am from the NGO Raptor Protection Slovakia. In my presentation, I will build on previous speakers and the very useful presentations and give you a closer look at the practical solutions and policies on electrocution that are in place in some countries. Some very brief introduction about our NGO. One of the main topics we deal within the organization is the issue of birds and power lines. For more than 40 years, we have been solving the problems of electrocutions and collisions in our territory in cooperation with power companies. In addition to the expert field monitoring, we also evaluate the safety of new protection elements and the riskiness of the line section poles in terms of collisions and electrocutions. Preventing birds from collisions and electrocution is important to compensate for other threats that our endangered species need to face. In various parts of Europe, different technical solutions for bird safety were and are being tested and evaluated. Many of them are not effective, some of them turn out to be highly effective. The positive fact is that only parts of potential dangerous lines and utility poles are responsible for majority of the killed birds. It's important also to establish collaboration between ornithologists, electric companies, policy decision makers, civil society to identify dangerous power lines, modify them, and thus prevent the negative impact on certain bird species. The results and recommendations that I will present were collected in the framework of the questionnaire answers and cooperation with experts from 27 EU countries and are summarized in the document Electrocutions and Collisions of Birds in EU Countries. Electrocutions occur predominantly on medium voltage power lines and are observed mostly on power lines with voltages below 45 kV. From the technical point of view, in general, the power line supports posing the highest electrocution risk to birds have the following parameters. Supports with an exposed loop of wire or jumpers above the insulators, supports with pin-type insulators, and supports with special designs such as transformer poles or switchers. The construction types of above-ground power lines used in different countries have many similarities. For example, poles used in Slovakia and Czech Republic are very similar, or the design used in Balkan countries. But many different types exist, even differing from company to company within one country. Large birds have a higher risk of electrocution because they can make dangerous contact more easily. Birds that stand over 1 meter tall, medium size or large raptors, storks, are considered the most vulnerable. On some pylons with transformers or disconnectors or a large number of conductors, electrocutions can affect almost any bird species. It's important to note that the electrocution risk depends not only on the support design, but also on how frequently the supports are used by birds. Another main factor is the characteristics of the surrounding habitat and thus the presence of prey species. On the other hand, proximity to urban areas, houses or linear infrastructures such as busy roads can reduce the potential use of power lines and thus the risk of electrocution. It's not possible to define a specific type of pole that is the most risky. It's necessary to approach the evaluation individually, and it's not only the technical variables that contribute to the resulting mortality. Based on the answers from the experts in the questionnaire, we have compiled 3 groups of pole designs that have similar risk ratings. Among the types of poles with a presumption of lowest mortality, the most frequently cited were crossbars with suspended insulators in an alternating arrangement with safety distances between critical points. Most electrocution occur when a bird touches a face with one wing when perching on a metal lattice pylon, usually when the bird lands or takes flight. Utility poles with upright position of pin insulators are often the most common poles of medium voltage power lines, and higher and repeated bird losses can be found. The gap between the wires and the crossarm is small, especially for large bird species. In many countries, together with transformer stations and switch towers, this type is high risk. Poles with complex constructions such as corner tensioning or branch types with several levels of crossarms, pin insulators, and with a combination of jumper wires and closely spaced conductors were also identified as the most dangerous in many countries. The gap between the wires and the crossarms and all other energized elements is small, even for medium and small bird species. In Slovakia, for example, we have given them the main priority due to the higher mortality rate, up to 7 times higher than in case of most common utility poles. Especially for the Saker Falcon, this type of structure is one of the most risky, as it uses just the crossarm to tear prey. Electrocution is not a problem in many EU countries, where most of the dangerous low and medium voltages have been placed underground. According to current knowledge and experience, it's possible to reduce the risk of electrocution significantly within acceptable cost for the electric utility companies. Distinction can be made between preventative measures and corrective and mitigating measures. There were many types of measures and solutions tested in some EU countries. Many of them turned out to be ineffective. Even more, some of them applied devices multiplied the possible risk. In order to properly select the appropriate element, it's necessary to perform monitoring not only before installation but also after installation to determine its effectiveness or to make the necessary changes if technical problems occur. The use of anti-perching devices tends to prevent the use of poles by birds without making structural changes to crossarm. There are several different types of anti-perching devices. In Slovakia, in Czech Republic, plastic combs, spikes or triangles have often proved ineffective and birds have a greater chance to come into contact with live wires and live elements, because the safe space is even more limited and birds try to land, especially if there is no tree vegetation around. A similar solution of bird spikes has not been effective in preventing electrocutions in Bulgaria. Using the plastic bench in the Czech Republic and triangles in Slovakia was not effective. Both solutions take up space on the console, but the birds still sit on the console, and worse, even more, they are pushed further to the powered conductors than in the case without a bench or triangles. Another solution from Portugal, insulating tape around the conductors, was used in this country, and raptors and corvids mortality was observed on these pylons retrofitted with this solution. It turned out that the birds teared the tapes with their claws and sometimes with their bills, opening holes in it and got electrocuted in consequence. If it's not possible to bury power line or completely change the type of crossarm, the best solution is to prevent electrocution are those that allow birds to perch safely on the poles. Installation of insulating or covering elements can be a temporary or permanent corrective measure. There are several solutions used by grid operators. Adopting of this measure will depend on the configuration of the crossarm and insulators and the species present in the region. Covering the conductors and other live elements with insulating materials can help to reduce the mortality risk and can be a long-lasting solution. This solution is the most common universal and is used in many countries and by many grid operators. Replacing of bare conductors on overhead power lines with covered conductors is a long-lasting solution, and it doesn't cause difficulties with maintenance in comparison with insulation equipment installation. On metal crossarms, another possible type of insulation consists of placing rigid plastic covers on the parts where birds perch so that they avoid contact with the ground connection of the pylon. The adoption of permanent measures on power lines with dangerous support may involve the total or partial modifications of the lines and crossarm. Use of installed at twin-stud conductors is a permanent measure but also expensive if any existing power lines needs to be replaced. The risk of electrocution is reduced to zero by this solution. This thick and thus well visible wire also help to prevent collision mortality. The most effective solution appears to be a complete change of pylon head construction for the new bird-friendly scale type with well geometry. The shape of the console discourages birds from sitting down, and at the same time the attached perch offers place to sit. This is the solution used in Czech Republic, and there were no mortality observed under this type of crossarm. And here are some solutions that are used in Hungary. Changing the location of risk elements can also help many times. Switchers attached below the crossarm were reported to be effective measures of how to decrease the mortality due to electrocution. Even the risk place can be made safe by only changing one expo jumper wire for the suspended type. It's a simple, effective and cheap solution that we use in Slovakia. Bare wires are replaced with insulated ones and the mortality rate has been reduced to zero. The products used to mitigate the electrocution risk should be made from durable, long-lasting materials and should be installed properly to ensure the protection of birds. If they are damaged or incorrectly installed, they are useless or even more dangerous than non-insulated poles. This was often reflected by many partners from EU countries, that even the products are effective, if they were installed incorrectly, the risk of electrocution increases. In many countries, there is no legal obligation for bird protection measures on overhead lines, but environmental impact assessment procedures are in place. They provide some guarantee that in general the interests of nature are taken into account. Almost all countries apply mitigation measures against electrocution from the very beginning of a power line construction. In many countries, energy companies use only bird-friendly types of pylons and devices during the construction or reconstruction of medium voltage power lines. It's not necessary to force them under the law. It's often the result of an adoption of the EU legislation and cooperation, which is based on the joint participation in nature and landscape conservation projects. Also, catalogs of suitable designs and solutions were set up by electric utility companies in close cooperation with government and conservation groups. The safety of protective devices is often evaluated by the written opinion of relevant nature conservation agencies. Also, many agreements on cooperation between energy companies and nature protection organizations, non-governmental organizations, have been adopted in many countries. A lot of energy companies also have internal guidelines how to proceed in case of electrocution. Eventually, they have clearly defined ways how to handle with certain type of construction and insulating elements. These guidelines are updated regularly based on recent results. This is the most important. The general basis of legal responsibility in the field of environmental protection and nature conservation is laid down in law. I will mention, for example, countries such as Germany, Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, where these laws are applied. In a simplified form, two basic principles are mainly defined within the laws. Anyone who builds or plans overhead power lines is required to use a technical solution that prevents birds from being electrocuted, and if there is a proven electrocution on power line, the network operator must take technical measures to prevent electrocution of birds. Cooperation with power utility companies is gradually developing, and most companies retrofit power lines after incidents very fast. The good relationship, cooperation and trust that are built in many EU countries with the electric companies are far more effective, useful and important than the obligations set by the law. Cross-border cooperation is a great advantage for knowledge transfer, exchange of experience and implementation in practice. As an example of such cooperation from many other excellent live projects implemented in EU, I can mention a project that we started in 2020, as in beginning implemented near the Danube River. We have managed to bring together 15 partners from 7 countries, and we have a total of energy companies on board. Thanks to this involvement of different stakeholders, we can work intensively together, exchange experience, learn from each other, and implement the most effective solutions. In Serbia, for example, the project has brought new insights into the extent of the problem of current interference, and thanks to the project, cooperation with energy companies have been launched, and effective solution can be applied thanks to cooperation and consultation with other partners. This is a strong benefit of an international project and the cooperation of several experts. Several practical solutions were presented which gave a general view of the applied procedures and measures to problem of electrocution of birds with the EU countries. I would like to highlight a couple of that I find very essential. At the national level, it's important to establish systematic field monitoring to help determine the actual fatality rate and to define hotspots and unsafe pole structures. Close cooperation with other relevant stakeholders is very needed. The involvement of energy companies in the development of methodologies, field service and data evaluations is crucial and will help to build mutual trust. There is a need to define priority areas and to systematically proceed with the implementation of the verification of the effectiveness of the measures taken and to share the results obtained and learned from others. Various experts groups can be used also for this purpose. A large body of knowledge is available in many EU countries, as various methods have been tested to ensure the safety of birds on power lines, and many of them have proven to be both very effective and cost-effective. This is a strong international contribution because the design principles of power lines are almost the same in many countries. This is also why new national and international projects and cooperation need to be carried on. First of all, I would like to thank to all the experts who contributed their knowledge to the compilation of this overview of birds and power lines on which I have based my presentation. I hope that my perspective on practical solutions and policies will be of benefit as a first step towards understanding this issue and the possibility of applying effective solutions and future mutual cooperation. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to participate in this excellent workshop, and thank you for your attention.